There are still many unanswered questions about the death of Freddie Gray, but many in the Baltimore community are feeling that this time they may get justice. 6 police officers, as we reported, will be charged in Gray's death. The officers claim they arrested the 25-year-old because he had a knife in his pocket. However, the prosecutor says the knife was legal and that there were no legitimate grounds for the arrest, an arrest that led to an apparently brutal ride in the back of a police van.
On April 19, 2015, Mr. Gray succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead. The manner of death, deemed a homicide by the Maryland State Medical Examiner, is believed to be the result of a fatal injury that occurred while Mr. Gray was unrestrained by a seatbelt in the custody of the Baltimore Police Department wagon.
Some are saying it's a case of what's known as rough riding, police deliberately injuring passengers who have no way of protecting themselves. This is an artist's conception of what it might have looked like as Mr. Gray was tossed around in that van. But even before that ride, a crucial eyewitness told Arise News' Colin Campbell that Freddie Gray was being abused. Kevin Moore is the man who took the video of Gray's arrest.
I zoomed in, I start recording, and they had Freddie laid down face on his stomach. He was handcuffed. Then, like I said, the officer, the bigger one, the heavier one, had his knee so buried in Freddie's neck that I really thought it was going to break right then and there.
Well, most of the demonstrations that followed Gray's death were peaceful, but looting and fires after the funeral led to a curfew and called attention to underlying problems. Like many American inner cities, Baltimore has not bounced back from the recession. The statistics tell a very sad story. Get this. 24% of the population, 1 in 4, lives in poverty. 37% of young black men are unemployed. There are 16,000 vacant homes, many of them lost to foreclosure. These are the issues that demand attention, though it's the riots, of course, that make the headlines. Well, Arise News' Shahan Ramkissoon has been on the scene all week. Shahan, what is the moods there since the prosecutor's announcement?
Well, Julian, we saw a 360 here. We had people who were very angry, wanting answers regarding the investigation on Freddie Gray. And once she made that announcement that the officers are facing homicide charges, we saw an eruption of joy. People out in the streets honking their horns, fist raised in the air to show a sign of victory. The mood now happy. People are happy this is going to court. Now they say the next thing that has to happen is for these officers to end up behind bars. Right,
Shahan, we're going to talk about that as well. In terms of the scene down there in Baltimore now, particularly West Baltimore, do you see a lot of presence on the street, specifically with the National Guard?
Yeah, you do. You see the National Guard all over the city of Baltimore. It's actually, something that you wouldn't see ordinarily. And all they do is just line up in the street corners, not trying to be confrontational at all. But their presence there, of course, does bring some sort of responsibility in how people behave. They know they are being watched, so they're very careful as to just what they do on the streets of Baltimore. After Monday night, we didn't see any riots. We didn't see anyone trying to vandalize property. And lots of people are saying it's because of the police presence, as well as the National Guard.
Well, also, Shahan, you got to give credit to the residents there. We saw hundreds of people involved in the cleanup there, especially around the CVS store. They're picking up all sorts of bottles of glass and debris, of course, after that melee there. And I think it's probably good to note that, largely, as we've reported, the majority of the protesters were peaceful. And I guess that brings a question, Shahan. There has been discussion of outside agitators responsible for all this. What light can you shed on that?
Well, residents that we spoke to about the Monday riots say that they know it was a group of youth who were involved in this. They were not saying it was people from outside. They say that they knew some of the kids who were there. You even saw the one mother smacking her kid around during the week because she identified him. So, people in the city, the residents of Baltimore, not really agreeing with the fact where some people are saying there were outside forces, so to speak, coming in. These were local residents who got out of hand, and that's why you saw the community come together to say that we love Baltimore, do not do this. And that really did lead, Julian, to many people actually coming together, trying to bring about calm and enforcing and encouraging peace. And that really did lead to non-violence for the rest of the week.
Well, Shahan, despite the disenfranchisement down there of the community, it seems like that West Baltimore community is pretty close-knit.
Yeah, definitely. It was amazing to see just how close this community was. everyone greeting each other regardless of whether they knew each other or not. You know, just being polite and courteous. I saw many instances where people would come together and talk about why they needed to rally to actually show that Baltimore is more than what the TV stations were showing. They were more than the flames that was shown on the streets of Baltimore on Monday night. They wanted to make sure that all media organizations, including myself, I was standing there doing crossings to you throughout the week. People would come up to me constantly and say, please show the good side of Baltimore. Please show the fact that we crave growth. That's what we want. And this is exactly what you see in this community. They want growth, they want economic success.
In terms of community involvement, we've seen the grassroots people down there, those who live in that area, come together. What about community organizers, community leaders, religious pastors? Are they very much involved? Do they have a cohesive unit together to deal with the problems that pervade this community?
They definitely are involved. I don't think they have a cohesive unit together. They're not really coming together to say, this is how we're going to look at it as one religious group or, you know, different religious groups. We have pastors from all different churches putting out signs regarding Freddie Gray, putting out loudspeakers and playing gospel music because they know this is what the community identifies with. They know that this sort of music and preaching peace will actually calm tensions down. And that's what they did. It was so interesting to see. You know, you had violence just one block away, and then the next block you see a church playing music. You see pastors on the streets preaching the word of God, hoping that this would calm people down, saying to them, this is not the right way to go. Violence is not the right way. And all we have to do, really, they were saying to people, is come together, say what we want, and hope that it will happen, that people are listening to us.
Right, Shahan, we're looking at that video, and of course you did great reporting down there for us all week. You're going to stay with us, but joining the discussion now is Valerie Purdy-Vaughns, a psychologist from Columbia University. Valerie, how significant is Marilyn Mosley's action on this case, in your opinion?
Oh, I think the action is quite significant. We haven't seen something like this before. Mm-hmm. And also it is trying to restore some sense of justice. I mean, we have such a long way to go, but it's trying to restore some sense of justice in really what's been a tragic case.
We have been looking at the community itself over the course of this week here and watching a lot of people come together. But also, you know, in the opening of the show, we had the graphs there, the alarming statistics, and 16,000 vacant homes, you know, so many people, a sizable percentage below the poverty line. I guess even as a psychologist, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out with these kind of disadvantages that many people face there are a lot of people who are probably facing hopelessness, despair, and even anger.
Right, yes. But there's another piece to this. There's sort of a psychological underlying factor. Police departments need to worry about racial profiling for many reasons. But one of the other reasons why they need to worry about it is that when you have a history of institutional discrimination, of police brutality, it sets the seeds for things like disobedience. Disobedience is a normal response to institutional racism. And so it's very predictable, it's very normal, it's a human response to institutional racism. And this is another piece, this history of racial profiling and institutional discrimination.
No, you were so right, but it also goes down to, Valerie, to the human condition. Now, you're a research psychologist. I remember a study done about maybe 20, 30 years ago, and maybe I think even longer than that, where they took rats or mice and put them into buildings that were designed just like tenements.
Yes.
And they put those rats in there, and all of a sudden their behavior changed dramatically, and we're talking about for the worst.
Yes. So that's an excellent study. The idea is that conditions, whether they're crowding, conditions, whether it's poverty, these kind of conditions create instantaneous changes in terms of a person's psychology. But that is the same with respect to all the other things that we're seeing here. It's not just about the history of Baltimore, the history of poverty. When police departments engage in institutional discrimination, you're sowing the seeds for unrest. It's very predictable.
Shahan, I want to go back to you. We're looking at, of course, the officers here that are involved. You know, there are 3 that are black, 3 that are white, and I want to discuss that with Valerie in a second here. But I also want to talk about what's going on in Baltimore right now. for a long time there, we're talking about since 1968, since the Holy Week riots there, that city has never recovered. Of course, that was the Martin Luther King assassination. And with that there, you have all sorts of despair there. The thing that I want to underscore here, Shahan, is that the leadership of Baltimore has been largely liberal, has been largely democratic. So it seems like the leadership there, those elected officials that people voted in, really weren't doing their job and haven't been.
They weren't doing enough. That's what people are saying. They weren't doing enough. They were focusing on specific areas, trying to, bring growth into the economy by setting up, businesses in certain areas, but not everywhere. And that's why this local council is being slammed during this protest. The mayor in particular, Julian, she has come under scrutiny because people are saying she does not care about the poor. She only cares about the rich. The inequality in Baltimore is something that really is the driving force of why people are so unhappy. Yes. You have really poor people watching the growth of their neighbors. It really is just their neighbors. We have rich people on one side and really poor people on the other. And they say the fact that the council hasn't made it possible for them to try to get jobs is the problem. The fact that the council hasn't invested in the education system in Baltimore means that they are not thinking about the future of the children and the future generations because they're not investing in education right now. So they're not happy. They're not happy at all with the current administration.
Right, and here it comes down to, Valerie, an issue that necessarily doesn't deal with race, but it deals with culture. You're talking about the police culture there. So people saying, well, if you had more black cops in there, well, not necessarily, because you find some of the black cops are just as bad or even worse than white cops there. So really what it comes down to is changing the culture of the police department and those who exist within it.
There are multiple factors. I mean, police departments are multi-layered. It's the police culture. There are, issues of institutional profiling. There's also the disrespect and trust that grows between the community and the police. Each of these are layers in this very complex puzzle. There are fantastic police officers out there. That's not the point. But the point is when you set these conditions within the department, it spills over and affects the community, and it really sort of sets the seeds for all kinds of unrest. I'm hesitant to use the word riots because this really is a predictable form of unrest.
Right. Valerie, I want to thank you for joining us. And Shahan, I want to end with you in terms of the voting there. We have a prosecutor in there who's 35 years old, and people are saying because she was voted in, she's doing the right thing. People should be voting and also keeping their politicians and those elected officials definitely responsible.
Yeah, she'll obviously come under criticism because she's 35 and because this will be the first time she's actually handling such a huge case. But the truth is, this is a state attorney that, really has experienced growing up in Baltimore. Her father was a police officer. Her uncles were police officers. And this does not mean that she says that she's going to be sympathetic towards police officers. She said to the youth, specifically, that she will seek justice on their behalf. And this is a woman that many people in Baltimore are now seeing as the local hero, Julian. She's one person we should be watching out for.
All right, I'm sure people will keep her feet to the fire. Shahan Ramkissoon, again, thank you for your excellent reporting. And Valerie as well, thank you.